Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and at time of writing I've put in more than 200 hours into Elden Ring. By the time this video is released, well, let's try not to think how many more. Either way, let's go over the good and bad. Is this a review? Well, not quite, but I suppose you could think of this as an extension of my first review, now that I've had time to play the launch version a great deal and had a taste of how they're updating the game as well as the online aspects. For each topic we'll start with the good, then move on to the bad. And we'll start with the open world. What makes an open world good? Can be a hard thing to quantify at times, but for me I suppose it comes down to a few things based on context. In Elden Ring's case, we have variety. Each area is fairly distinct visually. You can show me a screenshot of just about anywhere from one of the major regions, and I'll be able to tell you, oh that's Limgrave or Caelid. Whilst the Souls games have always used quite heavy colour coding, but they've managed to work it into the open world, which also has a dynamic time of day and weather system too. Limgrave is green, Caelid is red, Liurna is blue, Aldous is yellow, and the mountains are white. Variety's good. On top of that, the open world isn't empty. At least if you ask me, it's extremely packed full of sights and things to explore. That's another important aspect. The player should always want to explore, whether it's a rock formation on the horizon or some fortress. Always have something for us to travel to. If your open world is effectively an interactive walking loading screen from level 1 to level 2, why include it at all? Phantom Pain's open world being the most pointless one in a big video game, in my opinion. Elden Ring's one of my favourites. Moving on to the bad parts of the open world. Well, recycling is an obvious one to bring up. It isn't a huge one for me, but I feel it's important to bring up as a lot of people have complained about it from what I've seen. They're saying, oh, this, all the buildings are the same. You see an artist shack, then you see another artist shack, which is a copy paste. Yeah, that's true, but it doesn't bother me as I feel like enough of the game isn't recycled to make the recycled parts not egregious. I think it's understandable that every area doesn't have completely unique ecosystem, and it doesn't bother me too much. Same with repeated textures or plants, rocks, and various doodads. There's enough content that the recycling, whether materials or of enemies, doesn't bother me greatly. There's enough variety for me. Moving on, we have the bosses. So let's start with the good, shall we? We have both quality and quantity for the most part. I haven't counted, but Elden Ring has a lot of bosses. Major ones and minor ones. Many of those have exciting, really spectacular attacks, and there's a few memorable ones that'll be standouts in top 10 kind of lists, I imagine. But at the same time, they've not really done anything all that new with these bosses, for the most part. If we're comparing it with Dark Souls 3, many of these bosses would fit right in there. I have two main gripes with the bosses though. First up, the sheer level of aggression most bosses have. This was a thing starting to become prevalent in Dark Souls 3 as well. Many bosses have extremely tight windows wherein they aren't attacking with their 20 hit combos. You get those, hey, mum said it's my turn to attack moments. Whilst the attacks themselves are different, of course, a lot of bosses just turn into waiting for the boss to do some elaborate, really cool combo, and then you poke them one time like a little douche, and then repeat. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate it by any means, I just find it a little frustrating how we're not really progressing past just wait, poke tactics for the most part. When you compare it with things like Ninja Gaiden, Devil May Cry, or even Nioh, the bosses get to do way more interesting things than the players usually. The other issue would be the stagnation of bosses. Giant ones in particular. Remember the giant bosses in Shadows Die Twice? The Serpent and the Divine Dragon were handled really well. You don't just pummel their ankles for a few minutes and then win. Elden Ring has regressed to having your camera shoved up a giant monster's taint whilst you flail away at it. They don't even zoom the camera out for most of these encounters. It's a little odd. Now I'm going to go into some kind of vague spoilers here. The game's been out for a while, so hopefully you've had time to beat it. If not, skip 30 seconds ahead or so to avoid these spoilers. Still here? So yeah, the final boss is kind of cool looking, but so huge, and the fight is kind of the complete opposite of the one that came directly before, which was really atmospheric and cool and I liked that one, but then we get to the final boss and it's like, yeah, what is going on here? Kind of ruined it a little bit. If that had been something more akin to the Divine Dragon, I think it would have been much better. Okay, the spoilers are over now. I think Elden Ring would have been fine with a few cinematic fights. What I mean by cinematic fights are, namely, Divine Dragon and the Serpent in Shadows. One or two of them in a game chock full of bosses isn't going to detract from it in any way. Shadows Die Twice only has like a dozen bosses, and it doesn't detract from that either. Indeed, it's going to be superior to whatever those fights end up being in the other alternative, where it's just, oh, just pummel them in the foot for a while. Another way I have issue here is that the bosses, well, we never really did anything new with them in Elden Ring. There's a certain two-phase fight in Elden Ring, the one immediately before the final boss room. You know what I was thinking as I was enjoying the boss's really funny animations? Why not make that whole second phase just a cinematic fight? If you've played Endwalker, or, I don't know, Metal Gear Solid 4, you know, you get to the very final kind of fights in that. Yeah, they're cinematics, but does that take away from anything coming after, in Endwalker's case, a solo duty and an 8-man trial? If we bumped up Phase 1's health a little bit, then just made Phase 2 like a cinematic, would that really ruin it? I know QuickTime event is a forbidden term, but whether you make it interactive or just purely a cinematic, and again, these are just two very quick examples. It doesn't need to be a cutscene, it doesn't need to be a QuickTime event. It could be anything different from a gameplay perspective. It could be you turn the camera sideways and you have a Street Fighter 2D battle with him. I don't know. Just anything to give us that kind of unique and true 1v1 experience, instead of, I don't know, someone potentially summoning two giant fat golden knights who immediately show the boss why their character is named Bilbo T. Baggins. Just something immersive, I don't know. Again, I'm not saying Dark Souls games need to be full of this. I don't want Dark Souls kind of things to turn into, like, I don't know, God of War, where you have loads of scripted fights and stuff. But having one, maybe two, when you have like 20, 45 bosses or whatever, it's not going to ruin it. And this is just one of the example ways I'm trying to give how they could do something more with boss encounters. Shadows Die Twice was a perfect evolution of this. They gave us new ways to fight bosses without them feeling too jarring in the whole experience. I wanted to see a bit more of that evolution with Elden Ring. I know that might sound kind of overly harsh in some ways, so please don't take it the wrong way. For the most part, I appreciated the unique bosses in Elden Ring and their atmospheres. I just kind of wish we'd had a little bit more, and that so many of the fights didn't end up turning into just, okay, boss is doing his 5-second combo where he backflips and pulls out 2 machine guns and does like all these cool things, and then I just kind of only have time to poke him. I just want something to give us a bit more of a flow to some of these boss battles. But let's move on to PvP, and frankly, I don't really have much to say that's good for PvP. I'm not a big PvP person, and I haven't been for many years now for this franchise. I'm one of those people who thinks PvP should just be removed entirely or made opt-in for this game. Oh no, etc. Here's the thing though. Watching PvP in Demon's Souls was entertaining. Doing PvP in Dark Souls was a novelty, as it was new and it was fresh. Was it balanced? Absolutely not. But here's the thing. 10 years on, PvP is no longer fresh and exciting for me. I appreciate and understand there are many, many new people just getting into the franchise with Elden Ring. So for them, it's going to be like how it was for me back in Dark Souls 1 days, right? And I'm not saying that makes me better than them. I'm just saying I've been doing this stuff for 10 years, so it's not really interesting to me anymore. And the flaws of it are outweighing the novelty of it. It's purely from my point of view, okay? The balance sucks. The netcode isn't good. And this is absolutely not a competitive PvP game. It's a distraction. PvP for me and my friends in Elden Ring was just a distraction. 90% of the time, it was, oh, we've been invaded. There would be a few moments where we go, is that an NPC or like a real person? Usually, it was pretty obvious. then we would either immediately one-shot them, or they would one-shot one of us, maybe two of us, maybe the host. I'm sure a bunch of those invaders said, wow, what a gang squad. We're just trying to play the game. I mean, sure, we accept that PvP and invasions are part of that, but really, who benefited from this? Nobody really won in that situation. We don't feel good that we 3v1'd an invader or 2v1'd an invader. And if the invader killed us, it's like, congrats, I guess. You managed to one-shot people with something. Like, for me, there's no real satisfaction whether I'm winning or losing. I mean, I did a couple invasions just for a certain quest line, and I won some, I lost some. Either way, I didn't really feel any satisfaction. We were invaded by maybe a hacker 2 or 3 times. Again, I don't know if it was a hacker. The first time they were kind of invisible, we couldn't see them, and they were just like rapid fire sleeping us over and over again. Well, it leads us nicely into the next topic. Hackers, hacking, because FromSoft still haven't made these games. Well, they haven't protected them from cheaters and hackers. Like, for years you could, I mean, and probably still now, you go look at the, I don't know, the Book of the Guilty or whatever in Dark Souls 1, and clearly full of hackers, and this is like something anyone can see. Or maybe not hackers, but, you know, people modified saves, whatever. It hasn't been hard to document this. Again, it's not my area of expertise, but I'm absolutely sure there are fairly simple ways to protect the players from these things. I mean, people made, like, mods for, I think, Dark Souls 3. It was, I don't know, Blue Sentinel or Watchdog, where they had, like, a list of all these things to try and protect you from hackers. FromSoft can do this, especially with Bandai's money. They can, but they're not. And it's like they just don't really seem to care or acknowledge it or think of it as a big problem. You know, there's no reason why players should have to worry about other dudes popping up and ruining their experience. But ignoring that, let's look at the actual PvP in Elden Ring. People will, generally speaking, use whatever flavor of the week weapon allows them to one-shot other players. And from my personal timeline, that's been like the, what is that, like, two-handed curved greatsword? The Bloodhound's Bam Slamaboo. There was that one, then it was like the Moonveil Katana, then it was like Rivers of Blood, and Moog's Spear. People are going to use what is effective, which is understandable, but it's not really very fun in my opinion. Of course, people can host 1v1 fight clubs and so on, but again, not really something I'm interested in. People will always gravitate towards the most efficient and strongest things they can find. I guess what I'm asking is, though, at the end of the day, who actually enjoys PvP? It just seems like everybody gets mad at it, or just doesn't want to engage in it. Then we have the game's presentation. On the good aspects, well, we've got some nice music, amazing areas, and at times the game's lighting and visuals are really nice, especially some of these skyboxes and stuff. But on the negative side, we have the stuttering. The game's been out for just under a month at time of writing, and the stuttering still hasn't been fixed. I find that both disappointing and unacceptable. I could tolerate it in my review copy because, you know, hey, pre-release, right? But the fact that it still hasn't been fixed as of time of writing, there'll probably be, I don't know, a couple of weeks between the time I'm writing and recording this to when the video goes live. So knowing my track record, I'm hoping it's patched the day I upload this video to make me look like a fool, in which case I will gladly look like a fool and be out of date if it means the stuttering is gone. Don't get me wrong, the stuttering hasn't ruined my experience, but it sure has been a huge pain in the butt at times. And it kind of makes it hard to get kind of footage that I can use for, I don't know, archival purposes, for like using in future videos, because I don't want stuttering in my videos. That and the general stability, more than a few crashes over these 200 hours. More than a few. More than a dozen. I'm hoping that all of these issues continue to get ironed out, but I am concerned that the game launched before it was really ready. Look at the fact that we had various NPC questlines incomplete, needing to be patched in a few weeks after launch. That wasn't new content, that was unfinished content being put in because it hadn't been finished for launch. I found that odd and a little bit worrying. I think the game needed another month of polish, to be honest. Even now, we still have some big issues, the stuttering and online vulnerabilities that hackers present. Moving on, gear. There's a lot of gear in Elden Ring, armor and weapons. I love that. I've got a bunch of build ideas, which is it's exciting. Dark Souls 3, I really struggled to think of builds because R1 span with a straight sword was so much better and so much more efficient than everything else. It's like, yeah, you can go 50 points of faith with fully upgraded gear, and your lightning spears are gonna do like 10% more damage than a wooden arrow that needs a fifth of the stat investment. Now, of course, Elden Ring has its most efficient builds. Like, at the moment, Bleed kind of dunks on absolutely everything else. That doesn't mean the other stuff is, like, so much worse. Really, the only downside I have is more of a, well, I wish they did more with armor tailoring. It's great that we have some customization, I just wish it went further, including being able to change the colour of equipment, the true Fashion Soul's power, being able to dye cloth, enamel armour, and so on. Not really a negative per se, I just hope they do more with it, either in DLC or a future title. They could have had like armor and weapon inscriptions or engravings. Like say you have like a knight's breastplate, it's just like a plain breastplate. You could have inscriptions or something on it, which would be pretty easy to implement as it would effectively just be like a kind of texture overlay onto it or something like that. But just a random idea. I'd like more of that kind of customization personally. So, for the most part, I think Elden Ring is a great game. Absolutely packed with content, and I'm looking forward to getting some DLCs to further expand the adventure. We'd definitely, like that, look at that thing, you got like, I say look at that thing as if you guys can see it, and I'm not even looking at a map myself, I'm just like looking at my mind's eye. You know the map, like where all the divine towers are? They're like all forming like a kind of circle, then in the middle there's like a cloud there. There's definitely something there, and I think Miquella is the Artorias of this game. Kind of every game has like an NPC that gets mentioned a lot, but you never see them. I mean, I guess you kind of see a bit of Miquella, but I reckon it will be Miquella of the Abyss will be the expansion for Elden Ring. Most of my issues are thankfully only semi-related to the core experience. Things like the stuttering, yeah, it needs to be fixed. PvP is kind of baffling to me, but whatever. Some bosses and gameplay elements feel a little underdeveloped in terms of we could have had more done, but for the most part, it's a great game, in my opinion. What do you think, though? I hope you've been enjoying the game. I'm ready to go put in another 100 hours, I think. Ciao.